What infinite banking does, it actually teaches you what questions to ask. And the more you're involved and the more you're doing this, you start to broaden those questions.
Don't forget to think like a banker. If you are just going to make a choice that's a rash decision, quick choice, quick thought, and you're not really sure if you may return your capital, that's not a decision a banker would make.
I'm going to stay as liquid as I can. It keeps me more in control of my money. Otherwise, it's locked up until whenever it's at risk of rule changes.
And so people will spend months or years even building up all this cash value. And then the moment finally comes to use it and they pause and they're not quite sure, should I go forward or should I not go forward with the loan? Welcome to the Infinite Mindset Podcast, the show where we explore the power of the infinite banking concept and how to take control of your financial future. I'm your host, Andy, along with Scott and frequent guest, Jared. We're here to help you think bigger, build smarter, and create freedom on your own terms. Let's get started. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Infinite Mindset Podcast. Scott again, Jared's back with us. We're ready to get started. So today we're going to be covering, should I use my cash value or leave it alone? Because a lot of people get to a point where they've built up cash value and then they start having questions. And so people will spend months or years even building up all this cash value. And then the moment finally comes to use it and they pause and they're not quite sure, should I go forward or should I not go forward with the loan? And so that's really what we're going to be clearing up today in the podcast. That hesitation is where most people either start understanding IBC or they miss the mark and it starts going wrong for them. What we're getting at here when we're talking about should you use a loan or not use a loan is it's not about loan rates. It's not about arbitrage. And it's not about, is this better than X investment? It's really decision-making with capital and how you start thinking like a banker. Remember, this is a process, not a product. So this whole system and how it ties together, you need to start thinking that way in order to use it properly. So the big thing, and I think why people make these mistakes, it's conceptually how they're thinking about it. So when they're thinking about cash value, they're thinking about it like a savings account and pulling the money out, or they're thinking about the loan side of it, like they're borrowing their own money, which is not the way to think about this. Remember, when you have cash value, you're talking about collateralized capital. And your loan, you're accessing that capital while keeping the system intact. That's really important. And so conceptually, if you want to put all this together, it really means you're not interrupting the growth of your capital. And that's really what is key here. You didn't actually remove any money from the system when you took the loan out. And then if you're a bit fuzzy on the cash value or the policy loans, I recommend going back to episode 6, Cash Value Explained, Where's My Money Really? Or episode 8, Policy Loans, What Makes Policy Loans Superior to Conventional Banking. So if you're not sure about those, I'd stop the episode here, go back, listen to those, and you can come back to this one.
Maybe a quick reminder that the cash value is the current value of a future benefit. So there's a death benefit that's going to occur down the road. We don't know when that's going to happen. It doesn't happen until you graduate. Whenever that happens, they're allowing you to access a portion of that equity now. They're saying, here's your current value of a future benefit. You can get all in the weeds and get all insurance savvy on what those terms are, but that's a quick recap of what that is.
That's a very good synopsis. If you're still a little bit fuzzy, though, I'd recommend going back and listen to other podcasts. But yeah, that might just refresh some people, so it's perfect. All right, so the problem is when people start looking at cash value or loans or what they're going to do, they start with the wrong question and they go, should I take a policy loan? And that's a very binary question. It's a yes or no. There's a lot of other things to consider. And so it ignores opportunity cost, capital flow, and long-term system impact. Those are the things you really need to start looking at, not just should I take the loan or shouldn't I take the loan? And so really the right question to ask is, where is the best use of my capital right now? And the way I think about this, and it's probably a simple way to do it, is whatever I'm looking at, whether it's a purchase, investment, issue, whatever it is, would I be comfortable going to the bank and taking out a loan, knowing that I have the obligation to pay it back? Notice I'm not saying, will the bank approve me? It's just my comfort level in whatever it is that I'm doing. Would I be comfortable taking that money from the bank, knowing that I have that obligation? If the answer is yes, then it's probably time to move forward. If the answer is no, it's probably time to reevaluate and think about what you're doing. All right, so let's break this down a little bit. It's easy to say something like that, but if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, that's great, Andy. Well, what do I do now? How do I actually evaluate these things and make sure that it's going to work? So we have a 3-part filter that we put together, and hopefully it's going to help you evaluate whatever it is you're doing and see if that policy loan makes sense to do it. So first off is control. Whatever you're doing, does that increase or decrease control? And so for the examples, this just gets into whether or not you're going to take a loan or not. So if you're paying cash, we've talked about this before, your control goes down and your capital has completely left your system. If you're financing externally, well, you're no longer in control. You're at the mercy of whatever institution or person is lending you that money. They are now setting the terms. And then with the policy loan, you're in control. That's the biggest thing. You are in charge. So control overall is the foundation. Everything else will build on that. So that's step one. We'll get into a few other details into where you might take a loan from an outside source here in just a little bit. But paying cash, typically I don't like that, especially for major purchases is probably the big thing that I'm getting at there. If it's small, little everyday tasks, then yeah, I get it. But when we're talking about bigger stuff, I'm usually going to run whatever it is I'm doing through my policy first and then take a loan against the policy that is. The next thing that I evaluate after control is efficiency. And so is the capital staying in motion? And there's going to be a caveat here at the end, but let's just lay out the framework first. So first, if it's sitting idle in your policy, your capital that is, that's low efficiency. You are getting your interest and dividends on it, but that money is only working in one place for you. The next thing I look at is paying down low interest debt. And we've done topics on this before. The classic example is your home mortgage. Do you want to take a policy loan and pay that down? I would argue no, because you're going back to step one, you're losing control. Your capital is all now locked up. In order to access the equity in your home, you're going to have to go through some outside institution. And so that is usually not the most efficient way. And this probably doesn't coincide with all the thinkers in the IBC community, but I'm probably going to always have a mortgage on my home because I don't like the capital locked up there. And then the next thing we have is keeping the capital deployed. And so when you do that, you're compounding your system. And this is what we try and do, but you have to do it intelligently. And this is where it comes back to, but I'd be comfortable taking this loan from the bank and deploying the capital in that manner. And so if you're looking at this and you're trying to figure out what I'm getting out here, we're talking about sequencing of capital. Go back to episode 7 and we talk about that as well, if that's a little bit fuzzy for you. But in all these, really what it's coming down to is economic value added. If I'm improving what I'm doing, then I'm going to move forward with it. If I'm not, then I'm probably not going to do that. I just want to take a side note here real quick. When I'm evaluating these things, I'm not always just looking at the return on, I'm more concerned with return of capital. So it's not just what are they going to be paying me back? How secure is this capital? How quickly can I get to it? Is it going to be locked up for years or can I pull it back quickly if I need it? So all these things go into it. It's not just should I take the loan, but that's how I evaluate outside opportunities as well. And this is a caveat that I was talking about before when I was setting this up. I think some people, when they get to the point where they have cash value, they feel like they need to put it to work right away. And so this is that balance. I know I'm contradicting myself, but it's putting the capital to work and then rushing into something that you shouldn't do. So you're never going to have a perfect situation, but you'll have ideal situations where you can deploy the capital. But if you're so paralyzed looking for the perfect situation, that's really what we're getting at here. That's not good either. So there's that window, bumper lanes, whatever you want to call it, where on one side of it, you're not doing anything. On the other side, you're going too aggressive. And then there's that middle ground, which is really what we're looking for, where you've got the ideal situation to deploy your capital and you've got your cash value to do that.
Maybe to add something here, just to help maybe determine where those bumpers are or what that middle road looks like. Remember that this is a process. This is a long-term strategy of which you're struggling with what these choices may look like month in, month out, big picture stuff. You're not going to take a policy loan to buy groceries. You're going to take a policy loan for something that you would have went to the bank to get a loan for, except you're in control of it now. So just framing it in that sense, and then also saying that don't forget to think like a banker. If you are just going to make a choice that's a rash decision, quick choice, quick thought, and you're not really sure if you may return your capital, that's not a decision a banker would make. That's not something they're going to do. So when in doubt, revisit Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash and see what those human factors are and keep your human factors in check to see, is this a good or a smart choice just in financial choice decisions? Is where does that look like? How does that help my household? Is it something I was going to buy anyway? Is it a cash flowing asset? All of these things go into helping you realize where those bumpers are. Because you're exactly correct. You may end up at a spot where you've got tens, hundreds, millions of dollars sitting there and doing nothing with them. Okay, great. Maybe that's part of your plan. Or maybe you have over leveraged on the other end of it to the side where you're like, God, I hope something doesn't collapse because if it does, I can't pay X bill. Those are the two ends of the spectrum that you should never really see either of them. So I just build off of what you were saying. I hope that helps add some
No, that's huge. And then I will say the other thing I've done too, when I look at where I'm going to deploy my capital, I have two criteria that I look at. And it doesn't have to be both. It can just be one or the other. But number one, do I trust the person that I'm working with? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to have paperwork and stuff there just in case. But can I do a handshake deal with this person? If the answer is no, I'm not going to work with that person. The other side of it is if I'm not working with somebody else, maybe I'm doing this on my own. Am I an expert in that area? When people trust me doing it, do I trust myself doing this? If the answer is no, and you're just trying to figure stuff out, I'm probably not going to commit a large sum of capital to that until I get smarter on it. No. Do you guys do anything different on that?
Yeah, pretty much the same here.
And then the other thing I wanted to add too is I do keep my emergency funds in cash value in my policies as well. So I'm never going to leverage these things to the tilt where I don't have anything there. People say 6 months, a year, whatever it is, you have to figure out whatever sum of capital that is, but you want to have an emergency fund there. And I usually have a little bit of a buffer even on top of that. I'm fairly conservative. I'm very happy investing and getting returns, but I don't ever want to get to the point where my head is going onto my pillow at night and I'm uncomfortable because I don't know how I'm going to make things right. I think if you're leveraging your policies to the point where you're in that position, you're not really doing this the way you should be doing it. My personal opinion, but that's just where I'm at on it. Yeah. And then the last filter that we get to is replenishment. I think sometimes people I don't know if they brush over too much, but this is at the forefront of just about everything that I do. Do I have an intentional way of repaying that capital? Now, it doesn't have to be structured like a bank. It could be a long-term play. Maybe I've got something I know in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, I'm going to be able to get that capital back and repay the loan. I'm at least going to have a plan to pay the interest every year because I don't want that to compound and get away from me. But if you're doing stuff and constantly taking loans, and it's kind of, wow, I hope this works out, or I hope X goes this, or Y goes like this, and that's your game plan for paying back the loans, you're probably not doing it right. Now, I will say we've talked about it before. There are going to be things that pop up and they're unforeseen, and taking a loan and paying for those things, no issue with that. Go ahead and do it. Just realize hopefully at some point you're going to have a way to pay that back, but that should not be the norm. If that's how you're continuously operating, infinite banking probably is not for you, and we probably need to get back to the human factors and figure out how you even got yourself in that position to begin with.
Human factors in this is really a big thing, I think, for a lot of people. Is you gotta beat Willie Sutton's law, or more Parkinson's law than anything, but also protect yourself via Willie Sutton's law. And the human factors in Nelson's book I enjoyed that section, I guess, to put it out there. Important stuff. It goes back, if you gotta be a saver and beat that human nature before everything really starts clicking good. So
took that part for granted.
It comes back to don't steal the peas.
That's exactly right. Don't steal the peas. And I
took it for granted through my 20s. No lie. Even into my 30s, I was just like, whatever. But after I read it, I was like, oh, hey, yeah, I was about 32 when that all, kind of started sinking in a little bit better.
Yeah. Like, what a blessing that, you may have thought 10, 15, 20% out of every paycheck that comes in, that you're able to set that aside. Well, if you're already doing that, why not just take control of that? Why quit turning that capital over to somebody else? If you're already doing that, it's such an easy decision to make that decision on taking control. But maybe you're not doing that. Maybe scraping up 3% of every paycheck is really hard for you. And as crazy as everything's gone in terms of inflation and cost of this and cost of that, and throw all that together, right? I think there's a lot of people in that scenario that saving a couple of bucks every month is really, really challenging. So I encourage you, if nothing else, pull this book up and read the first 4 or 5 chapters that talks about the human factors that Scott's talking about. It really is encouraging and empowering.
Yeah, that's spot on. And when you're looking at that, like I said, go to don't steal the peas, because that's really what we're talking about here. If you can play honest banker, this is going to work. Then I like what you're talking about there, Jared, when you're talking about 3%, 15%, 20%, whatever it is. When you are taking that loan, factor in whatever you are saving, maybe whatever, hopefully it's opportunity, it's investment, but it might be something else. Take all that together and factor in your premium and your loans. Can you make all those payments? The answer is yes. And I would say it's probably decent. If you're getting to the point where you're overstretching yourself and you're going to be uncomfortable, then maybe it's time to reevaluate what you're doing based on those numbers. All right. So It's all great conceptually to talk about this, but now we're going to start bringing it back to real life type stuff. And I know, Scott, you had a story as well. So we'll go through this, what we were going to talk about in notes. And then, Scott, I think your example that we talked about will be really good to tie it all together at the end there. Scenario one, we're going to look at paying cash versus using a policy loan. So when you're trying to figure out which one you should do. And so we've got a $40,000 purchase, the example that we're using. And if you pay cash, we talked about it, the capital is gone forever. You've lost the compounding of that down the road. You've lost the interest you could have earned on that capital. Obviously, if you take the policy loan, it's still working for you. And remember, this is not just about the loan rate. I know sometimes people are going to look outside, and we've talked about this before. Number one, understand how to actually calculate what the actual interest is you're going to be paying. And then the other part of it is, if that outside deal is actually better, go for it. Go take that outside deal. But I would leave the equivalent amount of cash value in your policy so that if something goes wrong, you can get yourself out of that in case things don't go as you expected. But all of this comes down to control. And that's really what I'm illustrating there. It's not just about the loan rate. Nothing is free. Like we talked about, if you're paying that cash, you're giving up the interest and dividends you could have earned on it. That all needs to be factored in as well, because it's not just the rate, it's the long-term growth that you're missing out on if you go ahead and just pay cash up front as well. But it all comes down to long-term thinking and not interrupting the growth.
This concept becomes way easier to understand as you've built your business out. Someone that's sitting on the sidelines going, I don't know if I should do this. They look at year one, they look at the capital outlay, they look at what they have access to, and they're like, boy, that's hard to justify. Okay, cool. This is not a year one plan. As you build this out, as you get to year 5, year 10, year 20, I don't want to go down the path of some of her YouTube friends that sensationalize it and say that they're paying you to buy a car. But I understand where they're coming from. They're like, I know enough about it to know I get what they're trying to do, but it's a little sensationalized. You are making money already by just having a policy. Who cares what the interest is, what you're paying, whether you're paying it to the bank or paying it for a policy loan? That's why Andy's saying, who cares what that number is? You're paying that regardless. But what you're not factoring in is, what are you making already on your policy year over year? And that takes time for that to mature and get to a spot that it's really generating larger and larger benefits. So I guess I just want to encourage someone who's sitting on the sidelines going, I don't understand how this all works. Cool. Maybe look long range and think a little further down the road as to how this can generate something for you. And then when you decide whether you access it or not, when you put this into play, then it's the easiest decision you've ever made, because you've got your capital sitting there that you have access to. You're like, I was going to buy a car anyways. Why don't I access the capital I control that nobody's going to ask me any question on, that I can access tax-free? That all seems pretty easy. Why not do that? Because when that decision shows up, you're going to follow these same barriers that Andy's put out. I love the way you've structured this. And it just makes sense because you were going to do it anyways. So I guess I'm also trying to be encouraging in the sense it can be a difficult concept to grasp when you're sitting on the sidelines, not having an access to your policy right now.
The other thing that I want to bring up here, and I actually heard this the other day in another podcast I was listening to, but I thought it was really good. A lot of times people look at the cash arbitrage and they go, well, hold on, I'm paying a 7% rate. And I'm not saying that, I'm just using arbitrary numbers here, but let's say the loan rate is higher than the dividend and the interest. So you're paying 7%, but you're only getting 5% on the dividend side. You go, well, that's a delta of -2. Why would anybody do this? Well, you have your cash arbitrage, but you also had your value arbitrage. And this I thought was really interesting. The value arbitrage, not only looking at the difference between the interest and the policy loan, now you're actually looking at, well, you've got the death benefit, you've got the riders. A lot of times you have critical illness. You're not factoring the long term, which is, if I let this keep compounding down the road, how much better off am I actually going to be? If you look at Warren Buffett and where he's at, I know we're not talking whole life, but as far as compounding and what that does for you, most of the money he's made has been way later on in life when that compounding actually took effect. So while I get it, I wouldn't do something where I was just paying 7% and only making 5% of the money. I wouldn't do that. It's stupid. And I don't think anybody here would either. It's, you need to factor in all these other things with long term, and that's why this starts making sense. So if you're just a numbers guy and you're just looking at those two variables, then I agree, you're not going to do this. But if you can look at everything that this encompasses, and that's when you start seeing the bigger picture. On top of that, the control and actually being able to act, which we'll get into that.
That's exactly right.
All right. So jumping into that kind of leads us into an investment opportunity. So let's say something pops up, you have some kind of deal, And it's happened before. The bank looks at it and they go, no, we're not there. Or the time and the process and the paperwork to actually get this thing moving, it's going to take too long and that deal is going to pass you by. Well, guess what? If you can take a policy loan, typically within 2, maybe 3 days, all of that cash is going to show up in your account and you're going to be able to act on that deal. So as far as the seller is concerned, you're showing up as an all cash buyer. And what that does is instead of you reacting to the terms of the bank or the seller, you are now dictating the terms because you have all the cash, and that investment opportunity that maybe somebody else is missing on, you're able to pounce on it and you're going to be in that much more of a better position.
Who has the gold makes the rules.
And we've talked about this before. It comes down to conditional versus contractual liquidity. Conditional is everything needs to go right. The bank needs to approve it. Contractual is, like Nelson used to say, get the gophers out there to give me my capital because I'm moving on this deal. They can't say no. They just have to act because it's contractually written. Finally, get into it. This is scenario 3 that we're covering. It's those major purchases. Like Jared was joking, yeah, you're going to buy a car and get rich doing it. No, it doesn't work that way. But whatever it is, you're going to have the option to take a loan and pay for it. Most people will drain their savings or they're going to finance it. When you have an IBC thinker, they're going to evaluate the control and the impact of the system before they take the loan to make that purchase. And so I want to be very clear. This is not an investment. This is something you were going to buy. It's something you were going to buy anyway. And probably the major thing that I want to highlight here is if you would be comfortable going to the bank and you knew you can make those payments, let's call it a car or Ferrari. Somebody has that dream, they want to get it. If you'd be comfortable going to the bank to buy that Ferrari, go for it. But if you wouldn't be comfortable going to the bank and making those payments, but you happen to have enough capital where you can buy that Ferrari and it's just something you've always wanted, I wouldn't do it at this point. I would wait until you're in a better financial position to actually do it. The big thing in all of this isn't just whether or not you can use your cash value. It's whether or not you can use your capital intentionally. So you have a plan to deploy it and then a plan to pay that loan back. If you can figure that out, then you're on the right path. If you're just willy-nilly throwing capital out there and you're treating it like a piggy bank, back to what Scott was talking about, those human factors, then we're in trouble. I apologize. We jumped past it. Scott, did you want to go with the scenario that you had?
Yeah, I had just recently, if you go back a couple podcasts, I was missing in action, spending the night in the local hospital. So that bill came. It wasn't too bad. It was $4,015.38, but it was an unplanned life event. So basically what I looked at is I was like, all right, how am I going to pay for this? Do I just want to, give them the credit card, write the check, do whatever, and just be done with it? Or is there a better way to do this? So I'm going to have savings. I have policies. I have an HSA that I fund at work. The way it was a simple calculation. Is like you could have just swiped a credit card and did this and just been done with it. But I just wanted to see what the best way to go about this was. So I knew that if I paid it out of my savings, like we were talking about before, if you just pay it in cash or pay the credit card off in cash or whatever, however you're going to do it, it's just gone. I mean, you weren't really losing out on much growth, especially if it's sitting in a savings account, because savings doesn't really get you much anyway. But the cash is out of your system forever. That money, that water in the only pool of water that we have is just gone. If I took a policy loan out for it and then use that to pay it off, I would have had obviously a plan to pay that back fairly quickly, $4,000. But it was $320 a year to have that policy loan out. It's 87 cents a day, roughly. The drawback, the con to that would be that capital can't be combined with other capital to deploy it to other opportunities. So it's like, what's the opportunity cost? I don't know, but it's probably more than $320 for the year. So I was like, all right, well, we got that. Now I have this HSA sitting there. That's been funded pretty good. I've been doing it for my 4 years here at work, and I'm like, okay, it's tax. It goes in tax-free, it grows tax-free, it comes out tax-free, which is why I do it. My methodology on my HSA, just to throw this out there, is I've just been pooling up receipts for whatever it may be, and I was just going to turn them in when I retire and take that cash back out, the shoebox method, for lack of better terms, what some people refer to. But anyhow, if I just figured 7%, $4,000 at 7% for 20 years, it'd be $12,150 some dollars of interest growth. I'm making a big assumption that I will continuously get 7% every year, so I just use that number. It's a pretty standard number that people use, but I figured out to be it's $607 a year average, like $280 in the beginning and like $1,100 at year 20 in interest growth. But average it out, it's $607 a year. It has tax savings, so it's incentivized. But if I take it out, I give up that growth. It's still gone forever. But if I don't use it, it's locked up there. I have no control over it until I either decide to turn that receipt in later on in life or another qualified event. I mean, it's government controlled. They could be like, oh no, it's got to be a receipt from this year. So I'm taking a risk there, maybe on later on in life, because they can change the rules. So I was like, well, that money's locked up. I can probably do better with my $4,000 in my policy as, keeping me as liquid as possible. Is that worth the $607 average or $280 this year versus $320 that I'd pay for my own? And my simple answer was, yeah, I'm going to turn this receipt into my HSA and take a chunk of money out of my HSA. I'm going to stay as liquid as I can. It keeps me more in control of my money. It gets me back in control for a brief amount of time because I'm going to pay this hospital bill with it. But it's going to give me control of what I'm going to do with that money. And otherwise it's locked up until whenever it's at risk of rule changes. So that was kind of my thought process. It's a smaller amount. We're not talking about buying a vehicle or anything wild or crazy like that. It's just a simple hospital bill that came, but it was an unforeseen life event with, a pretty decent price tag, So I was like, all right, what's the best way to go about this? So that's kind of how I looked at it. Is my money going to be better suited I'm not going to invest $4,000 on an opportunity. It's going to be substantially bigger than that. But now it goes back into emergency funds. I could leave that, that's still a $4,000 buffer on an emergency fund if I use some more from the policy loan, et cetera. Long story short, it keeps me in control of my money and keeps me as liquid as possible. And that dollar amount that it's going to cost me in the long run, maybe cost me if everything goes the way it should, or that people think that it should, it's worth it to stay liquid to me. That's how I look at it.
What you described, it doesn't matter how many zeros are behind that number. The process didn't change. Really, the worst of your options, the worst one by your description was cash. It leaves your system. It's gone. You lost interest on what could have made from it. The opportunity cost of having cash leave your system. And really the two choices were HSA or policy loan, of whichever one you picked, you would have won. I agree with your decision. I think you made the right call. And at the end of the day, it's not my choice. It's yours because it's your money. It's your capital. So you get to pick where it goes and when it gets there. So, cool that all of that applies to the story and the description we just used, that it didn't matter what the zeros were behind it. It applied exactly to what you said. So kudos. Thanks for sharing.
Right.
I think that's spot on. You hit the nail on the head there, Jared. Scott, you too, just the way you analyzed it. I think the big thing for me looking at this is you had another option that most people don't have by practicing infinite banking. Most people have just been cash, or do I go to my HSA? With infinite banking, you have this third option. And really tying this all together, most people looking at this, they are trying to find an answer to a question. What infinite banking does, it actually teaches you what questions to ask. And the more you're involved and the more you're doing this, you start to broaden those questions. And so this is just a microcosm of what people are doing potentially on a much bigger scale, but it illustrates perfectly what people can do when they're analyzing the problem or whatever it is that they have on their plate, and then their options that are out there.
Really agree. Well said.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching or listening, however you're taking in the Infinite Mindset podcast. If you like what we're doing, go ahead and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. If you don't, please give us that feedback as well, and we will adjust. We've talked about before, if there's something that you want us to cover, let us know, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning into the Infinite Mindset. If you found today's conversation valuable, share with someone who's ready to think differently about finances. And don't forget to subscribe. Your journey to financial freedom starts with the right mindset.